Is Mistborn overrated or is it not overrated? Now, there are a lot of things that can be said. By the way, this is a question to you, and I'll share my opinion. You share down your opinion down in the comments below. Do you think that Mistborn is overrated? Yes or no? Or tell me if your opinion is more complicated. Now, there's a lot of things that I said about the Mistborn. The first one is that it doesn't really have good character development, or at least the character work within Mistborn, especially the Era 1, is very weak. Now, I would like to kind of agree and disagree. First of all, if you take a look at, for example, Vin, she is this character that happens throughout the journey to really learn to trust more, okay? And initially she is mistrustful, or at least, essentially she doesn't trust anyone in the story, okay? First of all, that, and number two, she has an external development where she learns to become a very powerful, Mistborn. And so you have an internal development combined with external development, okay? You have someone like Kelsey, who is after revenge, and he wants to avenge the death of his wife, who was killed in the pits of Hatsin. And so this is very important to understand for these two characters. So I don't really think that Mistborn has bad character development. However, I have to admit, and I have to put it out there, it's not very unique, it's very generic, and there is a lot of blueprints for this out there. So many authors have written the broody, orphaned child who has had a, terrible past, and that particular child, and their past happens to really make them, untrustworthy, or like they don't believe in love, or something like that. And so there is a lot of blueprint out there for this particular stuff, and it's not very unique, it's very generic, to be frank about it. Someone having an external development where they learn to use the magic is also very generic. In fact, Sanderson has written this before in Elantris. He contributed to this in The Wheel of Time. It was written throughout history over and over and over within the fantasy genre. So someone learning to use a particular magic system is as generic as it comes. Number two, Vin and her story to learn to trust and to get rid of this internal flaw and to become someone that is more, that essentially gives people, more than just one eye, is also very generic. It has been done a lot. So it's not unique, it's not difficult to do. And these are very simple things. Of course, simple is not bad, but at the same time, if you're trying to argue that the story has very good character work, it ought to also be unique. It ought to also be difficult to do. And so because of that, I kind of agree with it and I kind of disagree with it. I think, there is decent character work, but I don't really think it's something to essentially, it's not, I don't think it's a hill to die fighting for, it's not necessarily like the next great Shakespearean work, right? Now, there's a lot of things you can say about Brandon Sanderson, but you can never say that his plots are bad. Brandon Sanderson is the single author within the fantasy genre who I confidently believe has never written a bad plot. Number two, who I confidently believe has never written a terribly generic plot premise. He always has a unique plot premise, and this is very crucial. This is very crucial to understand, because the claim goes the plot within the Mistborn trilogy, Era 1, is actually bad. And also, you can even find a lot of people in reviews that gave the book 1 star, The Final Empire, for instance, where they will talk about how the plot was an appealing plot. It was not good. It was not really unique in any way whatsoever. I think this is completely baffling. The premise for the first book, The Final Empire, is, hey, let Is steal from the Dark Lord. So there's a Dark Lord, let's steal from him, or let's kill him, but it's an infiltration mission. So it's a heist, it's a fantasy heist. This is not very common, okay? And it is written like a heist because there are a lot of setbacks for the characters along the way. Number two, even there are some personal disagreements along the way, and few major ones, okay? And so essentially, when you look at the plot, it's very unique, because where have I read fantasy heist other than Mistborn? I have never read a fantasy heist other than Mistborn. So in terms of plot, it's super, super unique. In terms of also execution, it's very, very good. Another claim will go, the execution of the plot is not good. I have seen some people say this. This is completely false in my opinion, because I just don't agree with it. The execution, Kelsey, and how he comes across Vin, how he rescues her, the progression, the infiltrations, the spying, the subterfuge that happens, the spying that happens as well, how they slowly encroach upon the Dark Lord. It's just beautifully executed. I just think this is really, really beautiful. So I don't agree that the plot in Mistborn is bad. In fact, I completely disagree. I couldn't disagree more. Like, I could write a whole book writing I disagree, and it would still not be enough. This is one of the most unique plots that we have seen within the fantasy genre. Number two, this is one of the best executed plots that we have seen within the fantasy genre. I will die on this hill. This is a hill that I will die on. A criticism that I really agree with and that I think, is very valid is how the Mistborn has essentially bad dialogue and bad prose. Sanderson is one of those authors who writes minimalist prose. Essentially, it means sometimes his prose can be so minimal, it reads like a screenplay, okay? In fact, some screenplays will have literally more depth or more stuff, okay, more words, more descriptions compared to Sanderson's writing. And more to that, the dialogue is also very bad. I find it super cringy. But it is worth asking the question, what makes good dialogue? It's very simple, okay, but it's also, very difficult to actually execute. And it is that you have to have escalation. There has to be escalation within the dialogue. If you are writing a dialogue scene, it can start off as, in a very hectic moment, but you must have had escalation before that, okay? But if you're writing a dialogue scene out of nowhere, suddenly in the middle of nowhere, it helps to start in a calm ground and slowly escalate things. Another thing is subtext. Subtext is very important. Characters should not directly say what they want. Another thing is voice. Guess what? The dialogue in Mistborn does not really have any of these. It does have oftentimes good escalation, but there is barely any subtext and all the characters sound the same. They all have the same voice. And so because of this, I really agree with the criticism that Mistborn has bad dialogue and bad prose. I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, agree with these things. In fact, I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about the next point, and it is pacing. Quite a good number of people think that the pacing for Mistborn is bad, and this I find to be baffling because Sanderson is one of the most unique, most structurally adept, most structurally skilled author that I can find within the fantasy genre. There is no other living fantasy author that I have read that is as structurally adept and skilled as Sanderson. This man knows how to base a book, and the only books that I really think where he kind of just doesn't do as good a job is the Stormlight Archive books. And those books are just huge totems, man. They are essentially 3 novels. So don't look at them as one book, just look at them as 3 books in one, or 4 books in one, etc., etc. So if you look at it that way, you come across how good the pacing is, okay? And essentially in Mistborn, let's take the first book, The Final Empire. In the first 20,000 words, for example, you have the Scar slaves and you have them being freed by Kelsier, like 5,000 words. And then you have these events where you meet Vin and how, who she is, her character flaw and her struggles throughout history. And then them trying to con essentially a ministry, a well-guarded ministry. And then from that, you can see how Kelsier finds her, okay, introduced to him by a fellow, and then they both go on to find her and they rescue her after, of course, they were set up and, she gets rescued. And then she's informed that she is a Mistborn. All this happens within like 20,000 words. This is very crucial because that is a lot of things, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like a lot of things. It feels like the right amount of things. And this is what I'm talking about. This is what good pacing is. This permeates throughout the entire book. In the middle, it kind of gets wonky, gets a little bit slow and dull, but at the same time, it's really still beautiful. It's very, very well and beautifully executed story. And I will not really take anything from anyone that says the pacing is, bad. To each their own. But in my opinion, I think the pacing in Mistborn is just phenomenal. The pacing in Sanderson's entire catalog is phenomenal. And finally, there is the world building. And a lot of people think that the world building is bad. No, it's not bad. It's phenomenal. It's great. And to conclude this, I really do not agree with the sentiment that, Mistborn is overrated. I really think it's a story that is worth reading. I really think that's a story worth investing in, given it really links very well with the rest of Cosmere. And it's just a fun read. From the beginning to the end, you're always rooting for the heroes. And it's just a fun journey, a fun read. And I absolutely love Mistborn. Okay? So tell me what you think of it down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a nice day. Bye.